All right, well, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are. Just want to thank the organizer for giving me an opportunity to speak today. So what I'm going to talk about is the lessons we learned last summer when we converted our general chemistry course to an online course. Why aren't you flipping? Just grab my laser pointer. So the course in particular is our Chem 121 course at SFU. So our Chem 121 is a general chemistry and a laboratory course, so you need to pass both the lecture and the laboratory components. So this was last summer. So Dr. Goyen was tasked with focusing on developing the lecture component. Myself and Dr. Munn, we looked at the laboratory component, but then help each other out with each other's sections. So while we're doing this, I came up with the idea of, well, why don't we do a study and look at how our students did? So could we do a comparison of the results of the traditional versus the online system, and also ask students for some feedback on how they thought the whole system went? So a lot of information on this slide. What I have in the middle column here is our traditional model. When we're in person, what do we have? We have 3 lectures a week. We have a 1-hour tutorial. We have our problem sets, which are about weekly. Those are done online through our long Kappa system. We have final exams. We have 1 midterm. We have 7 in-person experiments. Of course, we have our grading rubrics. Don't have to go into information of it. And for our laboratory component, we have quizzes, report sheets, and a long Kappa or pre-lab assignment. So going to the online course, what changed? Being highlighted here in red is we added a weekly homework and quiz assignment. And we'll talk about those a little bit later on, but we just heard, McMillan speak about it. It's that online sort of system is what we used. So that was added to the course. The laboratory system, of course, changed. We went from the in-person to the virtual experiments. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And of course, the grading changed. And again, we'll get into the detail of that. So if we want to do a comparative study, we need something that didn't change between the 2 models of the course. And luckily, we had 3 things that were fairly consistent. One being is that long Kappa problem set for lectures. We kept those fairly consistent between 2 models. Also, our midterm and final exams. These tend to be mainly multiple choice with a few written questions. In both cases, they're usually developed through long Kappa. So the only difference for our online course is the students just wrote the exam at home as opposed to being on campus. And also for the laboratory, there was a long Kappa pre-lab assignment, and we kept that more or less the same. So now we had 3 things that we could compare to see how well the online students did versus the traditional students. A couple other things that changed. Again, we went from a hard copy textbook to the ebook, and with the ebook, and that's where we got the online quizzes and the online homework assignments, which were talked about just a couple of minutes ago. And of course, we had office hours in person versus online. Spend a moment to talk about the changes to our laboratory. So traditionally, students would prepare for the in-person experiment, would do an online pre-lab assignment, do the experiment, and write a report sheet. In our online version, we still had the students prepare as if they're going to do the in-person experiment, so they still completed the pre-lab assignment. Of course, they didn't come to campus. They completed a different report sheet, answering kind of what they were going to do. And then every other week, we had them do virtual experiments. So we asked our students some questions to find out some information, such as which system they prefer, synchronous versus asynchronous. And here are our results. 30% of students prefer synchronous, 25 asynchronous, and 45 had an equal preference. So it is fairly equal. So what are the reasons for this? So I won't show you the full list of comments, just kind of summarize it. For the synchronous group, the group for synchronous lectures, they felt it kept them on schedule. They liked the ability to ask questions and get a real-time answer. And they just felt it was the closest to the in-person experience. For asynchronous, students like to be able to set their own schedule and also to be able to review lectures. So a lot of students actually watched it live and then came back and reviewed later on. We're curious how often students attended. So 52% of our students always or almost always attended lectures. 40% sometimes, and 8% never, which is, consistent with the traditional course. As technologies advance, there's the development of e-textbooks. We thought this would be a good chance to ask our students, what do they prefer? And results indicates there's a fairly equal preference. 42% for ebooks, 40% hard copies, and 18% didn't have an opinion. So what about the grades? How did the students end up performing? So what we compared is our students from last summer to the students of the 4 previous summers. So we limit this study just to the summer semester, since the demographics of the students are slightly different in the summer semester versus the fall or spring. So try to reduce one of the variables by doing it this way. So if we looked at the lectures on-cap assignments, here's the average grade, 79 versus 80, more or less the same. On the midterm, 66% versus 64%, again, more or less the same. The final exam, 62% for the online students, 60% for the traditional in-person. So again, the results are more or less the same. What about for the pre-lab assignments? A little slightly larger difference, but 88 versus 91%. There's not much great difference here. So if you apply the same grading scheme to both courses, we use a traditional grading scheme, you found that the students' final mark is more or less the same, 69 versus 68%. One question which was asked of our previous students was to rank what was their learning experience from 5, which is excellent, to 1, which is very poor. So we asked it of our students last semester, and we looked at the results from summer 2016 and 19 students. This was done because Dr. Goyen taught those 3 semesters. So we removed the variable of having a different instructor, and surprisingly, we actually got the same results. When we actually go to another decimal point, they're actually both 3.55. So they both rate the learning experience as equivalent. So what's our net summary out of this? Our data suggests there's equal preference for ebooks versus hard copies, equal preference for synchronous versus asynchronous lectures. The grades of the traditional course were kind of matched in the online course. And the learning experience of the students was ranked as equivalent. So in one sentence, if we were to summarize what we found out, would be for a well-organized course where students are kept informed of the changes and expectations, students are resilient and will respond positively. Now, of course, making sense like that, we do realize that some students needed extra support to deal with the stress and anxiety of COVID. And again, it was stressful for many students. So where does that lead us? So something going forward that we've discussed. We were happy with the way our online exams went. So could we use these exams for a makeup student who missed an in-person exam? Or instead of an exam being canceled to a snow day, could we just easily transfer to the online exam instead? For the online lecture, if a student, say, were to fail the lecture portion of the course, they would generally retake the course. So they're retaking essentially the same course. Would it be beneficial for them instead to take an online version, which is structured slightly different, and use it more as a remedial course? We found having online content every week was beneficial for the students. When we go back to the traditional manner, our students only come every other week. So should we add an online component on the off weeks? So a final thought, and this came from feedback from the student that sent us, which said nothing is better than actually going to school and attending lectures in person and actually doing the labs by hand. This course, in my opinion, did a fair job. Keep it up. And I think this summarizes it well. Although we put in a lot of great effort into making online courses, nothing really, matches the online and in-person experience. So with that, I finished my talk. We can discuss about any aspect about this in the question and answer period, or you can also send me an email. Thank you.